Hi, I'm Tim Conaway and I'm running for President of the United States. Everyone complains about taxes. The complaints are only about paying the taxes, but all the complications that are associated with the federal income tax also have a bearing on these arguments. And there's a lot of recent hoo-ha about paying fair shares of the tax burden. Let's talk about the individual income tax as opposed to business taxes. Currently, we're subjected to a progressive tax, meaning that at each higher income level, there is a higher percentage of taxation. The next level of taxation is applied only to the income above the cutoff. So let's say you pay 10% on the first $9,582, but then you pay 12% on the amount between the $9,582 and the next level that pays 15, the next cutoff that's 15%, and so on. Are you confused yet? The tax regulations and the guidelines and the other supporting documentation from the government totals just about 70,000 pages. So if any of you have read all of it and understand it, you can get in touch with me. My email is shown below. It's a confusing setup even at the simplest level. There are also standard deductions such as $28,000 for a married couple filing jointly. You deduct that from your total earned income and to find out what your adjusted gross income is. Then you owe taxes on the remainder of that. If there are kids, there are more deductions for that. The standard deductions work for people who don't have a lot of expenses that can be itemized. And typically today, the main itemization is the interest or a portion of the interest that you pay on a mortgage. Because these deductions drop the taxable level of income below the basic untaxed level, more than 40% of wage earners owe no taxes at all. Now, the taxes are deducted throughout the year, and then in the following spring, these people can file and they get a tax return. But basically, they end up not paying any taxes. Fair share? The people who end up not paying taxes have to, go through the whole process of trying to get their money back, and then the IRS has to send out checks or make direct deposits in bank accounts. The whole system is typical government inefficiency. Let's look at some numbers. I'm not going to get too deep into the math, but in the year 2020, or for the tax year 2020, taxpayers filed 157.5 million tax returns. And the adjusted gross income, this is the income after all deductions, the total was $12.5 trillion. And the total amount of taxes paid to the government was $1.7 trillion. The average income tax rate, when you take all the 7 different progressive income tax rates for individual earners, was 13.6%. The top 1% of taxpayers paid almost 26%. It was more than 8 times higher than the 3% paid by the bottom half of the taxpayers. So in other words, the people earning the lowest amounts accounted for only 3.1% of the total revenue that the government ended up with after all of this confusing tax situation. Whereas the top 1% of earners paid more than 1/4 of the total revenue that was collected by the federal government. So, fair share. The top 50% of the taxpayers paid 97% of all the money that was collected during this period of time. So, as the household income increases, so does the tax liability. What I propose is a flat tax. This would be, and I'm proposing what our bottom rate is 10%. 10% of what people earn. Now, I'm not counting any kinds of deductions for this, either standard or itemized. There are a lot of people who are opposed to the flat tax because they say it burdens the lowest income earners. Well, as you've seen from what we talked about above, the lowest income earners pay little or nothing, actually owe little or nothing in taxes, and what is collected from them is eventually returned through a complicated bureaucratic process. That money is being deducted from their paychecks throughout the year, so what they have to live on at any particular time in the year would not be affected by having to pay 10% of their income in taxes. The 10% applied across the board without deductions, well, would that end up being enough money? According to some sources, the amount of earned income before adjusting for the various deductions was more than $19 trillion in the year 2020. There was $12.5 trillion in adjusted gross income. More than $19 trillion was in earned income. And if you take 10% of that, then you're going to get $1.9 trillion. The individual income taxes paid in 2020 was $1.7 trillion. So that's $200 million more by doing it the flat tax way. The flat tax also means that there's no filing. There's no reason to audit all of the receipts and the rest of the business, the bureaucratic red tape that goes on. And so by simplifying this whole process, we reduce the size of the IRS. As you recall, last year there was legislation enacted to add more than 80,000 IRS agents. A flat tax would allow us to reduce, we would not need any of those 80,000, and we could reduce the entire IRS agent pool by a significant amount. I would have to do a great deal more research and involve people who are better at these kind of things than I am to come up with an exact figure on that. But it's part of my plan to reduce the size of federal government and also reduce the fear of federal government that people feel. People fear the IRS. I don't want people to fear the federal government. We are not the overlords of people. We are the servants of people. And we need to provide a reasonable service that anyone can follow and understand, that's transparent to everyone. Now, the flat tax has been proposed before in Congress, and it's always batted down by the people in Congress. We don't have time or space to go into all the reasons that they would oppose a simpler, more uniform, and really more fair tax system. But what we need to do is, if you are a like-minded person, if you follow what I'm saying and feel there's value in it, and you would like to run for office for a Senate or a House seat from your state, or if you know someone who fits that category, get them to file their election papers, and where it says party, put no. If we get enough people who aren't part of the established parties, who aren't part of the giant corporations that employ salespeople under the guise of being members of the Congress and Senate, then we can get enough people in Congress to make a difference. Remember, it doesn't take everybody to make this change. If we got 25 or 30 seats in the House, if we got as many as 5 seats in the Senate, we could hold the process until we get the compromises that we need. I'm Tim Conaway. I'm running for President of the United States. I want the federal government to serve the people. I want the federal government to be reduced in size because the bureaucracy is expensive and inefficient. So please join this cause, become part of it, or find people who want to be part of it. My email address is below. You can contact me about your recommendations. I want to hear your ideas. I'm Tim Conaway. I'm running for President of the United States. Keep it up.